Hi guys. So welcome again to yet another conversation. Today we're going to be talking about honoring your roots. And I think first I'll explore what does that even mean? What does your roots mean? Why is it important? And how is that relevant if you're to get on this journey towards really knowing yourself? One perspective that I actually always want to remind people is we're just knowledge. That sounds very demeaning, but it's actually very true. If you think about what animates humanity, it's that constant desire to explore and acquire new knowledge. And that knowledge is what helps us keep approaching, getting nearer and nearer to the knowledge that we call God, or what is unknowable to us. And of course, this knowledge comes from all sources. So there's knowledge that comes from, and I think I don't want to call it a hierarchy, but there's certain things that you just cannot ignore around the knowledge that makes you who you are. So for example, there's your parents. And this is very important because your parents' circumstances in many ways will determine your circumstances. In fact, there's a saying that the two most important parameters in the knowledge you'll acquire over your lifetime are your date of birth and your place of birth. And of course, that starts to signify where were you born? What was that environment? What did it look like? And even as I'm speaking, I'm starting to understand this a bit better. So let's say you were born and your father disappeared completely. And you don't even know who he is. Is it important for you to honor that knowledge? It's very important for you to honor that knowledge because he was there at your moment of conception. So there is knowledge that he passed on to you. And it's not clear what knowledge is. In fact, if you look at a lot of diseases, autoimmune diseases in particular, there is no clarity on where that comes from. But that could be you responding to the knowledge that your father passed on to you. So let's say your father was in the war. Maybe he fought in the war, or he was raised by a violent father, or there was an imprint that was put on him. Let's say he was a black man, not a white man. Or let's say your father was a white man versus a black man. The knowledge that passed on to you that is meant to help you survive in this reality and acquire more knowledge will be very different. Because for a man who's been enslaved, the knowledge he'll pass on to you is this reality is about predator versus prey. So it becomes almost like an instinct that you carry with yourself that keeps you safe. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It actually does keep humanity safe for us to carry that imprint of predator versus prey, because in this reality with free will, predator versus prey is fair game. That's what I mean. You have to honor that knowledge. But then let's say the moment you were born, there is another man who came into your life and was part of your environment. And this is what now I'll start speaking as your environment, because the knowledge that you were born with, let's say you were born an orphan and your mom was not part of your life, your dad was not part of your life. You'll need to honor their background, but then you need to now acknowledge the environment that you walked into. Because that environment, especially the first 5 years, really determines your perspective on life. And we feel like those perspectives can be changed later. But they become so ingrained in you because you even forget those perspectives that you had when you were so young. I'll give you an example of my own life. There's a lot about my childhood that I still don't know. I can only guess. I can only postulate. For example, was I wanted as a child? I can postulate that maybe I wasn't wanted. And if I postulate I wasn't wanted, it starts to explain how I see myself as not good enough, right? That could be an example of a perspective that maybe you had, because when you were born, maybe you were beaten up and everything, but you don't remember that perspective, but it formed your outlook on life. So you spend your whole life feeling as if you are not wanted and you're not good enough to be wanted. And I'm describing probably a lot of people, because as parents, one thing we forget is your child does not look at you the way you look at yourself in the mirror. Your child is reading your energy. That's what they're responding to. So they're not responding to what you're saying or what you're doing. They're responding to how you're speaking to your wife in that moment, how you're speaking to them in that moment, does your tone raise? Does it go down? All those cues are being picked up. And that is a lot of knowledge that a child is actually ingesting in that moment. And it's very important to understand that. So that's part of your nature, actually. We call it nature, but I want to group it all as nature because there is that part of the nature where these are the people that you spend time with and your siblings as well, actually. I think that's one area that we've not really addressed because I don't know how many people get to complete the work on their parents to the point where they start the work on their siblings. I had a sibling, for example, who was 5 years older than me. And I tell him many times, in many ways, he represented masculine energy for me. In a way that my father maybe was not able to. Or maybe my father did, but there is certain aspects of love that he just wasn't exposed to, right? So that environment is very, very important. Like what's in the home, who are you interacting with, how are they treating you, what's their energy, right? And energy is actually what's passed on more than anything. It's the energy of the spirit of the home. Really, that's what I'm trying to describe. I grew up in a home where the spirit was, at some point became very violent, but early on, there was actually a lot of love that I forgot about. And the love never leaves. Actually, this one thing I realized, love never leaves the room. Even in a conflict, love is still there. You're fighting because you love what you're fighting for. So love never leaves. If you give it a chance, you'll realize it's right there. You can reach for it. So even as I'm saying there was conflict, there was love. And that's part of the knowledge that is really hard to honor. For some of us who are raised in tough backgrounds. My wife, for example, was raised in a very loving environment, at least the first 5 years, very loving environment. So for her, that's her default perspective. Her default perspective became love. In fact, she's been a big part of my healing because that was her default perspective, right? For me, my default perspective was fear. So even when I say love, maybe that was gratitude that my father did not beat me that day. That's what I'm calling love. But it was there. It was there. It's something that you can reach for, but you can't sustain it, but you can reach for it. Now, the other part of your roots that now kicks in, because this is you forming. And I'm a software engineer, but I don't know if I'm still a software engineer. Today I was talking to some software engineers and I realized they're speaking other languages. But in software engineering, there's a concept called inheritance. Where you create a child and the child inherits from the mother and the father, right? If you don't know which methods have been implemented by the mother and the father, clearly you don't have a full perspective on who this child really is. And that's really the knowledge that I'm hoping that people really pay attention to. And I think the therapy field has been very good at creating spaces for that. And there's a lot of ways of really understanding how do you honor that. Now, honoring, especially your parents, for me, is a 2-step process. The first step is healing out of fear. Forget even love. Just heal out of fear. Heal out of that which makes you afraid because they were in your life. Why am I afraid to be in a room with another man? Is it because I was assaulted? Is it because my dad did not do anything? Is it because he didn't hold me? Is it because this? Heal out of that. You don't have to. The intention ultimately is to heal into love, but that is a journey you can't even demand of a human being in this reality, just given the way things are. It's a very tough step to make. And I'm speaking as someone who's been on that journey for quite some time. But healing out of fear is something that is just knowledge. Your parent doesn't even have to be around, doesn't have to take part. It'll be good if they took part, but you can talk to your siblings. You can really understand what was in that. What did I inherit? And how did that manifest? Especially your early years. Your early years are very important. Now, a pointer to your early years is your last relationship. So if you can't remember what happened in your childhood, just think about your last relationship. Or the one you're in right now. The one where you're not speaking out, you feel you're anxious when she walks in the room or he walks in the room, or your boss is like this or your friend is like this. And somehow you feel like you can't speak for yourself. You don't. Like what is it about that person that makes you feel like you actually cannot speak for yourself? That is knowledge that you need to acknowledge that knowledge so that you can actually now learn how to speak for yourself. Because you're actually replaying your first 5 years. And as you do that, you start to remember more and more about what happened. And remembrance is a wonderful, it's a wonderful process because I mean, I don't know if it happens for everyone, but for me, you start to remember imprints that came from before, like from, so you start to now remember. And for me, the most powerful thing is remembering all the way back to your roots outside of humanity, outside of a human being. Human life has been around for 4 billion years. This is just the latest version of us. We've been around for a long time. We came from the sun at some point. That energy was beamed in. So think about your roots from that perspective. That means there is aspect of the sun in you. Because we all came from the same great grandfather who's called the sun. We came from elements like fire and water and wind. They've all shaped who we are. And now I'm really leaning to the part of your roots that we tend to ignore. Nature. Nature has such a profound impact on who you are. And that's why place of birth is so important. Once you understand where you spent your first 5 years, did you spend them in town? For example, I have friends who grew up, let's say, in London, right? And, maybe had wonderful parents, but then the moment you leave the house, there's gang violence. That's your nature. That's your environment. That influences who you are in such profound ways, especially as a young child who's trying to make sense of what's going on. And that's why parenting becomes important, to really separate what's going on inside, what's going on outside. But most times parents are too busy to even pay attention to that aspect. What is that environment that this child is experiencing that is going to shape who they are? And the good thing with nature is, if you just study geography, then you really start to discern the aspects of nature that really start to inform how you see the world. I'll give you an example of myself. So I was born on the equinox, which means I was born the day the sun is directly above the earth. So the sun, the day and the night are exactly the same length. The sun comes from the same place, sets in the same place for quite some time. And since I was born close to the equator, there's not much variance. So that was one vector of consistency in nature that I found. Very, very powerful vector of consistency. The other vector of consistency for me was the rain, the land, the trees. It's this place, it's called Nyeri, where it rains, then the sun comes out. It's very consistent in that aspect. So the climate itself was also very consistent. So when you start to now see how those vectors shaped your perspective on life, because I expect consistency for me to succeed. It's not something that I think we should run away from. I think it's something we should actually embrace, because over time, I've also started to see consistency as something that is sacred. So that starts to explain my sacred roots. Like, why do I start to lean towards spirituality and consciousness and all these things and start to understand them in that way? It's because of where I was born. So where I was born, the love that I felt was primarily from outside the home, from playing in the river, from, just being in nature, being around trees, being around forests. That really, really shaped who I was. If I had the same parents in, say, Nairobi, and there was violence, I don't know what vector of consistency I would have latched onto. And people do find vectors of consistency. Everyone finds their vector of consistency. People might find their vector of consistency in, man, if you have a gun, you're good. That's a vector of consistency. Another vector could be, if you're in church, you're good. That's a vector of consistency that you find. You could find a vector of, if you surround yourself with bad men, they will take care of you. So that's your vector of consistency. So everyone latches onto a certain vector, and that becomes a big part of your root. Now, some vectors are not sacred. So if your vector, for example, is violence, a gun, harm, if your vector is built on something that is harmful, then it cannot be sacred, because harm is not sacred. There should be no harm. But if you find enough vectors that are not harmful, and that's why you see a lot of civilizations maybe have worshipped the sun, because the sun has No intention to harm. That's not the intention. The intention actually is to give life and create and hold space for the world so that the world can be all it can be. That's the intention. It's a powerful, divine, wonderful intention. It's a consistent intention, day after night. I mean, it happens. So when you see that that is part of who you are, and this is very powerful, that means you carry the same perspective as the most powerful force of creation there is. That is part of your root. The intelligence that actually built this whole reality is part of who you are. And once you tap into that, really start to see that there's a whole side to you that maybe you've not acknowledged, right? And if that side remains unacknowledged, you can never fully come into yourself, because how do you even know what you're accepting? Because acceptance, for example, is a big goal in this journey, accepting who you are. Once you accept who you are, then that shows that you're starting to heal out of fear, because you're no longer afraid of yourself. You're no longer afraid of your creation, because you're starting to understand that you are the creator as much as you are the creation. You are participating in your own tapestry of life because your roots are in life. Like, you are life. It's you. You can't separate you from life. You are part of that tapestry. You are carrying that whole knowledge with you. So honoring those roots starts to get you closer and closer and closer to fully accepting, fully understanding. I had to fully understand who I was. I mean, my story can shake a lot of people, like, wow, that's weird. But I had to understand, Sam, why are you suddenly turning spiritual? Why is spirituality even something that defines who you are? Before, I never thought about spirituality as, I always used to be the guy who's like, yeah, I know God exists, this. Yeah, then, go to the bar, drink, whatever. I mean, I still do those things. But then now I know that there's a part of me, there's a root, a massive root that I was carrying that is part of who I am, that I was not acknowledging it. I was not acknowledging it. I thought it's just air flowing around. I didn't know it's knowledge, it's energy, it's information. It's me who is flowing around. And that's incredibly powerful. And you don't have to be the world. You just have to now align with that you that includes not just your parents, but includes the nature that really shaped how you see the world. So I think that's what I wanted to really clarify, because that part is not, I don't know how you address that part. For example, I'll give you an example. Today with climate change, if you look at the US, a lot of people are now saying when they go to a therapist, they don't even want to talk about their parents anymore. They want to talk about climate change, because they're starting to realize, oh my God, a deep understanding of climate or a deep connection with climate is important for my own well-being, which is actually an interesting outcome of that is actually true. If you fix your well-being, you are fixing climate, because as within, so without. You really start to understand as within, so without, and live as within, so without. Because you now start to understand that, look, if you don't understand that nature that has shaped how you see life today, where you can't shift out of fear. And your parents were wonderful parents. Yeah, I love it when I talk to white people, and a lot of them are like, yeah, me, I don't have trauma. I want childhood trauma. Me, I walk in with, yeah, I was traumatized. For them, it's like, no, my parents were wonderful, and we lived in the hills, and this, and this, and this. And then they will say something like, yeah, but then winter would happen, and, that would be sad. But we were good. I'm like, bro, wait. You just mentioned something very important. Nature actually came in and rained on your parade and told you, bro, actually, this is part of your nature. It is part of your nature to be afraid. So if you don't acknowledge that that's part of your nature, you will always be afraid. So you'll feel like you're in love. Because the other thing I want people to understand about love is not something that is inside us. It's all around us. It is literally who we are. So if that is the definition of love in that environment and you don't acknowledge it, then you're not tapping into love in that moment. You're tapping into love layered with fear, which is gratitude, actually. I've come to realize this. Or jealousy. Actually, it's either gratitude or jealousy. Okay, today, actually, I was trying to understand, because jealousy, even after gratitude, somehow, if you're still alive, jealousy is still there. But you're not, that means those are actually blocking. So you think you're feeling love, but you're feeling jealousy, or you're feeling gratitude that you are not harmed, or jealousy that you're not as lifted as the other person is. But that's because you've not acknowledged that there's a big chunk of you that is shaped by winter. Winter is coming. That is shaped by abundance is going to end soon. But maybe nature is just manifesting a different kind of abundance for you. Because there are people who genuinely love winter. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's all bad news. There are people who love, like my host mom in the US, she loved going skiing. Forget my host mom, I love going skiing. I'm not going to lie. I love going down the slopes and feeling, I don't like that my fingers are about to fall off by the end of it, but it's fun. It's a thing to do. It's fun. And you can't do it I can't do it in Kenya. You can't do it during summer. Like, those are things we can't even do. You have to climb to the top of the mountain to do these things. For them, that's a gift they just get. Here is snow beyond belief. The whole land is white. The polar bears are out. I know that's a good thing. But you can see how learning to love that can start to now guide you towards who you truly are in that nature. Instead of now you saying, the only way I can be myself is to pluck myself from that nature and plant myself in some other nature. For real? Well, if you acknowledge that nature, maybe you can pluck yourself and find yourself. And you can, by the way, these are things I'm saying, you can live your whole life without it even ever engaging in this kind of work. But if you truly want to engage in this type of work and arrive at your balance, because my balance and yours are very different. My balance is equator, this, all those. That's my balance. And I find it to be very helpful for me because it gives me a perspective that allows me to become a source of knowledge. And that's my balance. But your balance could be very different. Let's say you're in Switzerland. You're surrounded by mountains. There's lakes. There's beauty all around you. Summer, winter, you name it. Is it cold? Yes, it's cold. But there's all this beauty that's around you that has shaped your perspective, right? So if you don't honor that root and you continue growing in this other world, and then you get trapped in the material, and the material will definitely separate you from that root. In fact, that's the material's highest purpose, is to separate you from your nature. And you start fighting your nature. And when you start to fight your nature, guess what happens? Einstein told us, very small object can release a lot of energy. So you are a human being who is just releasing all this negative energy, and we're wondering, where is it coming from? It's because you're fighting a perspective about yourself that is, I don't want to call it your shadow. Actually, it's a big shadow that you're carrying around. You're carrying this shadow and then you start to blame other people for your wars and all this and all. But really, if you look at the polar bear did not move to the equator. No, he started to grow far and did certain things differently. And he eats in September and sleeps for 3 months. Like, wouldn't that be cool if there's people who actually tell you, me, when it comes to October, man, I just pass out, man. I sleep. And when I wake up, bro, I am fresh like a tiger. That's a perspective. So that's what I'm saying. This, and that's the diversity of life that I feel like as human beings, we've really lost. Because sometimes when we just focus on your dad, your mom, yes, those outcomes are actually numbered in many ways. Because there's only so much in the range of emotions that you're going to understand about your parents before you heal into love and realize love never left. And by the way, you won't get to that. If you get to that realization that love never left and you don't heal, then you've bypassed into love, which means the fear is still there. But you will not, you will understand love from your brain. You'll see love as something that you need to explain to yourself or remember. You'll not be in it. You actually won't get into it. So you actually need to go through that. In the end, like me, I know, in the end, I heal into love. Like right now, with my dad, as much as there was a lot of chaos, man, I'm growing to love this dude. This dude was special. I mean, this was my father, bro. You're so cool. Like, but that's me being in love. Because once you're in love, you realize it never left. That's when you turn the other cheek. It never left. Even when that person was slapping you, there was love in that moment. So but then that is something that you heal into. You become like it. You start to and it's all around us. That's what's so cool about love. That's why for me it's amazing that It never left. So it's all around us, right? So what I'm saying is, if you now really acknowledge your natural perspective, which is your natural intelligence, if you're from the lake, what did the lake signify? What did it mean? If you're from the Rift Valley, if you're from the coast, if you're from the mountain, if you're from Turkana, where consciousness, what do all these things, what does you being there, getting involved in that energy? If you're from the Arctic Circle, if you're from London, if you're from wherever you're from, or you've experienced all these environments, maybe you spent your first 5 years there. What can you tell us that is starting to really become clear for you, that feels like a light that has been on your whole life? Because if you start to really tap into that, and I've tapped into mine, and it's incredibly powerful. Mine is like, whoa, this is a powerful light. It's an incredibly powerful light that is so consistent with creation, with mankind, with evolution, with consciousness, with everything that is, but it's because I went and dug. And usually you're digging through symbols, you're digging through your last relationship, actually, and slowly working. And remember, as within, so without, slowly healing, and then starting to now just pay attention a little bit to which part of my root is nature. And for me, that's when you really start to now see the diversity of outcomes that humanity can manifest. Because if everyone manifests the outcomes of Sam Gikandi from some village, Dogamano in Nyeri, that's not life. That again, we've landed on a local minimum or a local maximum where we are all adopting one perspective. But imagine now with that diversity of perspectives, where when you land in the US, you can say, I want to sleep for 6 months. And that becomes our vacation. when we want to sleep, we just go to the US. You adopt that perspective and you become a polar bear and you sleep for 6 months. I mean, I think I'm saying that because I actually need to sleep for 6 months, guys. So roots always have a very exalted purpose, because roots is nature's way of natural selection, of bringing a viable human being into the world, right? So there's every chance that when you get to your roots, you're purifying yourself, you're reducing yourself. So at your roots, you're not an alcoholic, you're not abusive, you're not this, you're not... All those things that you're carrying around are because you're not reducing yourself to your roots. You're not identifying your roots. So a lot of these issues that we struggle with, and these are I don't want to call it Luciferan, but I will call it Luciferan. These are the energies that mix with the energies that exist beyond space and time. You know, the energies of God or of creation, or, you know, the very purified energies. Those energies that exist on this earth because of our own free will. I'll pick up a beer and I'll drink. So those energies that start to come in really are showing you how far are you from your balance. And your balance, knowing your balance ultimately, mother, father, first 5 years, nature. Nature is very... Actually, this is the first time I'm actually really realizing how important nature is to who we are. And if we start to tap into that, and there is now, I think as more and more people start to really realize this, we'll start to see more and more, hopefully revelations, or more and more people really starting to understand, why is it cold in the US? Or what's the higher purpose of the desert? What's the higher purpose of the river? What's the higher purpose of Colton in Kenya? What's the higher purpose of whatever is around us? The lake, the Nile, all these things. Like, can we consciously rebuild the Nile civilizations, understanding the river and the source, and how that is, we're just doing what's in our nature. We're not trying to subjugate, build empires, blah, blah, blah. We're just trying to now align with what we know is a natural perspective in all these different places. And I think if we start to do that, then you can start to now find pathways that dig you out of this separation state where you're separated from love by fear, because you're not really acknowledging that shadow part of yourself, which you feel, I'm just going to be an alcoholic. Yeah, maybe because Russia is very cold. So yeah, you're drinking vodka. Maybe once you understand that is your natural perspective to drink because you're stressed by the winter, maybe then you'll realize maybe what I need to do is sleep. And then now that starts to become a perspective. Or what you need to do is during winter, be more conscious of how do I take care of myself. Like, find spaces where you can actually find happiness and really start to enjoy the fact that you're in that environment, and start to see the good in that environment, as opposed to, no, my mom, my dad, and they were good people, but I'm still messed up. And I think that even for me as I'm speaking is something that I hope we can start to create space for. And that's part of now helping humanity start to tap into that natural intelligence, which is by definition insanely and abundantly diverse. Yeah. I think I think the biggest realization I had, especially healing out of fear, was with just knowledge. I think once you embody that, and it seems like you're reducing yourself, but actually it's the reality that is higher than time space. So now you start to understand time space from outside time space. And once you understand time space from outside time space, then you start to understand, wait, knowledge has no greed, has no fear, has no this, has no. So you can easily now say, knowledge doesn't judge, knowledge doesn't do. So you can see now what are we involving ourselves in? It's like you've written some code and this module is sending SMSs, but that's not necessary. Like, you don't have to do that. And that starts to now help you reduce your life. Because today we're doing more than we should. Everyone in this world is doing more than we should. Everyone. And we feel like we're doing less than we should because we're not good enough. But we're already doing way more. Way. We're doing the most. But it's because we've really started to stray away from that natural perspective. Do you see a tree trying to cut hammer nails? And no, it just is. Even a cat, even a dog, they just are. Us, man, let this dog be that dog's boss and that dog the most. And there's no natural perspective for that. So it becomes a struggle because now we're fighting nature. And we forget as a species, even if we are 4 million years old, the world is 4 billion years old. That's 1,000,000 times 1,000. This is like a blink. That's literally our existence compared to all of life. Yet we are hanging on to these constructs that have come in recently. And when we said, without these constructs, we are going, without the government, without Kenya Kwanza, Kenya will die. No, Kenya will remain always, and we will remain. So it's just that appreciation of we need to simplify life. And people are talking about great simplification. Like, how do we simplify life? And I think what I'm doing is trying to find those vectors that help people now start to simplify these things. Simplify. And the wonderful thing is, as you simplify, you start to adopt. Look at, I was in the Mara, and you see all the animals that graze, they behave the same. They have even elected one animal to be the prefect, Topi. Using the Topi standing on top of the hill, always. I saw a Topi following a lion just to warn the others where the lion is going. I swear to God, it's crazy. But all the animals have the same perspective around how do we deal with lions, how do we deal with hyenas. Do we have that perspective, or are we trying to get our minds to now understand this? Or can we just adopt that perspective? And then suddenly we are living with the animals and they're not worried about us because we understand that perspective. So that's why with all these AIs, we are now enhancing that separation with AI. Because with AI, we are being told there is a higher intelligence than us. And when someone tells you there's a higher intelligence, they're talking about God. God is the highest intelligence there is. In fact, God is silence. I don't know how God does it, because just with silence, he built the whole world. And that is the highest intelligence. So when you tell us that there is another one, wait, does it lead to God, or is it like, how do we start to, and this thing is just guessing the next word and making videos and doing what you tell it. If it's doing what you tell it, how is it higher than me? So it's that confusion that's kicking. It's a Tower of Babel moment. Like, if you think about it, these guys have built a tower that's trying to approximate God. Yeah. And that's to have that kind of power present in a reality where there is time and space means we're opening a portal that we don't even know where it leads. And that's very, very dangerous. So those are some of the things that I really feel like. And now how does AI tap into natural intelligence? How does it tap into winter is cold and now and this and the sun and blah, blah. The air, the environment, the wind, the sun, the ocean, the swimming, how does it experience those things? It's impossible. So how can that be higher than a 2-year-old child? It's not. A 2-year-old monkey, no, it's not. It cannot be higher than a zebra. A zebra knows, when zebras are being chased by lions, they know when to cross so that the lion gets confused. And you'll see maybe giraffes are doing the same thing. It's a perspective they just adopt, and their stripes become, and these things. So how can we expect AI to help us attain that kind of diversity or attain those kinds of perspectives and advance and start to evolve as a race? Because we haven't evolved since we started walking, I don't think. I think walking was the last big step that we took, literally. Since then, we've just been trying to make sense of balance. Because and for me, that's been my big focus, balance. Because I knew balance is why we find it difficult to even breathe. We're still learning how to walk. We're still learning how to walk. We're still learning how to move around without a tail to balance us. That's what we're still doing. If you look at it, if you zoom all the way out, we're just a species that has just learned how to walk. Yet we're trying now to be God. It's beyond, for me, it's beyond belief. So I really hope that starts to, and once we tap into that because that natural intelligence is God. That's actually what I'm describing. It's that unknowable perspective that orchestrates time, makes sure things happen when they need to happen, makes sure even you in some random island, you're tapping into the same perspective I'm tapping into if I'm next to the mountain. There's no difference. Literally. You're just not paying attention to it. Once you start paying attention to it, you realize, man, yeah, of course this mountain is special, but so is Ruwenzori, so is the one in Chad, so is the one everywhere. Nature is all around us. The earth is a living, breathing thing. So if you don't even respect, it's like a kangaroo being in a pouch and not respecting the pouch, but then respecting the other 2 kangaroos that are in it. Like, yeah, those 2 kangaroos were important, but the pouch, bro, what is this pouch? And once you really focus on the pouch, now you start to zoom out. And before you realize it, you have a solar perspective on things. Because you've zoomed out enough, and then you realize, actually, I am part of that. We're 80% water. What is water? What is water's alchemical properties? Why is it here? What is oxygen? When we breathe in, breathe out, what does that mean? And those are some of the things that I think can really get us closer and closer to nature. And that means closer and closer to what we've always called God.